Dad log, stardate 01222021. Welcome back, Legion, to the Dad Cave and the Dad Logs Revisited. Episode number 3, where we talk about mental health and creator well-being. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Dad Logs Revisited. My name is Dad Got Game, and it's good to have you. Today, I want to talk about mental health and creator well-being. This is something that has come to light more in the recent past than I think it had prior to this, because there are many creators who are suffering from burnout and who are overall just their well-being is significantly diminished from before they started creating content, especially full-time. We've seen a lot of creators take their own lives, which is obviously a tragedy. So today I want to cover what it looks like to make sure that you are focusing on your mental health and your well-being as a content creator, because it's important. I have experienced many of the things that I'm going to talk about today, and I want to make sure that I help those who are getting into the content creation space, or even if you've been in the content creation space for a while, I want to make sure that I'm giving you some ways to help your overall mental health and to realize that the grind will always be there. Let me repeat that. The grind will always be there. Let's start with maintaining your relationships. Now, I'm going to talk about this from a few different perspectives. Obviously, many of us have many different relationships in our lives. As someone who has gone from, college graduate to corporate America to now owning my own business in content creation, I've developed a lot of relationships over the course of time. I've developed relationships from my band days where we were building a network of other musicians, of venue contacts, of folks that were involved in our process, our creative process, et cetera, et cetera. I've developed corporate America contacts from multiple different companies, and I used to be in a technical sales role. So I visited many companies, and I've built a network from my experiences as a technical sales rep. I've also built now a network around content creation, industry contacts, other creators, community members, artists, and they run the gamut. So when it comes to maintaining relationships, one of the hardest things about content creation, especially for those of you who are part-time, who have maybe a full-time job, or you're full-time going to college, and then you're trying to stand up your content creation career on the side, maintaining relationships usually ends up being one of the first things to go, right? Maintaining relationships with friends. I've even seen people who have lost their marriages and have lost very close relationships because of content creation. So make sure that you are taking care of the relationships that are most important to you. The reason I say the relationships that are most important to you is that, as I mentioned before, I've got a very large network of people who I know, right? But I've got a rather small network of people who I deep down love and care about and cherish that relationship. There are a lot of folks who I'm colleagues with. There are a lot of folks who I would call acquaintances. And there's a much smaller subset of folks whose relationship I have matters. And so when you are looking at cultivating and maintaining your relationships, that means taking the time to maintain those relationships. And that's something that I've not ever been really good at. I struggle sometimes to really let people know that I care. I struggle sometimes to really let people know how much their relationship means to me. So that makes it even more important to reach out, to make sure that you are talking with those people, caring for those people, seeing what those people need, serving those people. As a follower of Christ and someone who is deeply affected by my faith, my job is to be a servant leader. My job is to serve other people. It's part of the reason why I took such a massive pay cut to create content, because I believe in the business that we've created of taking care of others and giving others a place to belong. I believe that the reduction in my paycheck is worth the value that I'm bringing to other people. And that's what relationship in my mind is all about. So make sure that if you are getting into content creation, if you're just starting your journey, it can be very easy to let those relationships that are most important to you slip. If you have a significant other, make sure you get their input. If you're trying to build a schedule, make sure you get their input. If you're needing to put in extra time on this, or this, make sure you're getting their input. Because if you're not getting their input, if you're not caring for that relationship, it will fall apart. And the only way you make it in this game is to have a strong group of people and a strong set of relationships that can help you survive it. All of the top tier creators have people behind them, and those relationships are important. So make sure that you're taking care of the relationships that are most important to you. Part of maintaining those relationships is making sure that you're taking breaks. And I know that this is counterintuitive, and I know that there are going to be people who are going to say, if you're not grinding all the time, you're falling behind. And as someone who adhered to that for a very long time, where I was constantly talking about the stream, doing stream stuff, making new stuff for the channel, sacrificing the relationships that were important to me, I will tell you right now that you need to make sure that you are taking a break. If you are finding yourself, even if it's a short break, just a day, take an extra day off. If you are mentally not in a state of mind that is conducive to being creative, your audience, no matter how big or small, will notice. You will not be making the best content that you can make because your head's not in the right space. And this is something that I have realized, especially over the last 6 months, how important it is for me to take breaks. I have been spending more time going up north to visit my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister, my nieces and nephews. I have been spending more time taking some breaks to ensure that my mental health is in the right space to create the best content that I can for you guys. Because I know that when I'm not mentally 100%, when I'm struggling because the numbers are down, or when I'm struggling because I've got this block where I'm struggling to be creative, I'm struggling to create the new experiences that I want to create. When I realize that, I know that I'm hitting that point of diminishing returns for my content and for my community. My community knows when I'm off. My community knows when something's up. They'll come in and they'll call me out on it. They'll be like, "What's wrong, dude? You're off today." And a lot of times I try and stuff that down because part of being an entertainer is working through the hard times. But you have to know yourself well enough to know when working through the hard times is going to be detrimental, and it would have been better to take a break versus just trying to push through and grind through, and eventually you hit a big breakdown. We've seen many creators, like I said, we've seen many creators who have taken their own lives. We've seen many creators who have had to take extended 3-month, 6-month breaks because they hit that breaking point where they just burned out so badly that they lost everything. So it's super important that you recognize when you're coming to that limit. Everyone has limits. Some people are different than others with where their limits are, but everyone has limits. And if you don't identify where those limits are and respect the limits that you have, you will burn out and you will lose more than you will gain. I speak from personal experience that you will lose more than you gain. Okay, so make sure that you guys and gals are knowing where your limits are, respecting your limits enough to take a break when you need it. It's super important. When we start talking about limits, it's a perfect time to start talking about recognizing when you're burnt out. Okay? I have run the gamut. In my 3.5 years of creating content, I've gone from the highest of highs to what I think are probably the lowest of lows. Might be able to get lower. I don't know. I don't want to find out. So recognizing when you've hit your limits. Now, there's a part of this is understanding and trying to figure out where your limits are, right? So I would never encourage people to not push, right? Always be hungry. I talked about this in the last podcast. Always be hungry, right? If you're not hungry, if you're not staying hungry, you won't succeed in this business. Staying hungry and being hungry and grinding is a good way to find where your limits are, right? And this is where it gets dicey, because if you don't know yourself very well. Now, again, I've had 37 years to figure out who I am as a person. For instance, I'm not a morning person. I'm not great at waking up in the morning. I'm not great at getting up and getting going and doing what I need to do in the morning, because that's just not who I am. It's not how I'm built. I function better at night. But I also have a family that I need to get out the door in the morning. And now that the kid's back at school, I have to be up even earlier because I have to get them on the bus and then get the other kid ready and drop them off at daycare so that, you know, the wife can get to work and all that stuff. I know that I'm limited in how late I can stay up burning the midnight oil because I have to be up in the morning as well. Making sure that your schedule fits so that you're not burning yourself out. Now, some people can operate on 3 hours of sleep for weeks on end. And I applaud those people, because if I get less than 6 hours of sleep for more than a few days in a row, I get sick. I know that that's a limit of my body. That's just the way that I'm built. If I'm getting less than 6 hours of sleep for 3-4 days, this happens at conventions every time, right? Not only is there the increase in germs and all that kind of stuff, but then I'm getting a lack of sleep because I'm staying up late. I'm getting up early. I'm not getting the amount of sleep that I normally get. And that leads me to getting sick. Now, when we talk about burnout, usually we're talking about that from a mental standpoint, but it can also be from a physical standpoint as well. When you're sick, when you're not feeling well, when you're exhausted, those are all signs that your body isn't prepared to take on the day the way that it should be, right? And there are some ways to overcome that. I know a lot of people, and I'm not great at this. I'm not great at working out every day. I'm not great at getting the exercise that I'm supposed to be getting, which contributes to the fact that I just need more sleep. If I were working out, I could potentially operate on 6 hours of sleep instead of 8 hours of sleep. Now, I'm not a doctor. So again, take this with a grain of salt. This is my experience, and this is me knowing my body's limitations as it stands today. Recognizing burnout is extremely personal, and burnout looks different to everybody depending on who you are and depending on what you have going on. So it's very, very tough to figure out when you're hitting that point. But here is what I found to actually recognize it. All of what I said previously is to say, if other people in your life are noticing that you're irritable, stressed out, looking tired, and they are willing to speak up and say something about it, you're probably hitting that point. You're probably inching towards that point where you hit burnout. That is one way that is almost foolproof that I have found. When people start to say something and start to recognize that I'm looking more tired than normal. As a parent, you're always going to look tired, but looking more tired than normal. I'm more irritable than normal. I'm not my happy-go-lucky self. I seem more stressed. And someone says something about it, that usually sends up a red flag in my head that says, okay, people are recognizing that I am at a point where I'm regularly looking more exhausted, more stressed, more irritable than normal. Maybe it's time to take a step back and say, okay, been working a lot, had a lot on my plate. Take a step back, take a day off. Just spend some time with the kids or go out and about and go for a walk. Take a day to yourself, put your phone down and just go somewhere, anywhere. Recognizing burnout is extremely personal, but the big red flag that you should recognize is if someone is approaching you and saying, you look tired, you're irritable, it's been this way for a couple weeks, what's going on? That's probably a pretty good indicator that you're hitting that point. And it's time to take the foot off the gas just a little bit. Take the foot off the gas. Realize you're approaching that burnout point and recharge the batteries. Take a day off. Find a way to re-energize and to get back to putting the foot on the gas. Which brings me to my next point. Taking vacations. One of the hardest things to do as a content creator, and I've seen this from every person who has tried to create content and do live streaming. You are a slave to the schedule. Once you set a schedule, you want to maintain that schedule week over week, over month, over year. You've heard me say this, right? One of the most important things to creating consistent content, which is what we covered in the last podcast episode. It's up here somewhere or over here, one of the two. To the last podcast episode, one of the things to creating consistent content is setting a schedule, right? The minute you set a schedule is the minute you become a slave to the schedule. And any deviation from that schedule can be detrimental to your content and to your community, which makes taking vacations even harder. But, and there's always a but, taking vacations is important. I've seen many big creators step back and say, I'm going on vacation. I will not be around for a week. It is what it is. You know what? Your community will still be there when you get back. especially if you've built a very strong community. I have started to recognize, and again, this is for me, this is where I'm at. I have started to recognize when I'm hitting that burnout point where I've been going, and I've not taken any time to recharge the batteries to get the rest that I need to create really good content for you guys. And I hit that point of burnout. When it comes to taking vacations, you need to get it in your head. Realize that if you've built a strong enough community, your community will be there when you get back in a week. In fact, they're probably likely to come back in full force because they've set their schedule around you being live. And they're like, I'm here from this time to this time every day or every other day or whatever your schedule is. And then when they've had a week off of you, they're like, oh, I miss hanging out. I'm coming back. Another part of making sure that you're taking care of your mental health is understanding that you need to be celebrating other people's successes. Now, this is a potentially controversial topic, if you will, because a lot of people get into content creation and can get very, very quick to make this a competition. Oh, so-and-so got X amount of followers. I need to get X amount of followers. So-and-so has X amount of CCV. I need this much CCV. So-and-so that was around my size is starting to blow up. What am I doing wrong? Why are they getting the opportunity? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are so many things in content creation that can end up making you bitter that you fail to celebrate other people's success. And something that I've always been hyper-focused on has been making sure that I lift other creators up around me. If someone landed that dream partnership or sponsorship, say congratulations on Twitter. Let them know you're behind them. Let them know you're rooting for them. If someone hit a follower milestone, lift them up. Let them know that, hey, you're doing awesome. Keep going. That's fantastic. Positivity breeds positivity. Negativity breeds negativity. I mean, it was Martin Luther King Day, and he said that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only the light can. And if you are not being the light in your group of people who you support, then you're not celebrating other successes in the way that you should. Now, this is just my opinion. A lot of people take this as this is a competitive space. You should be competing, every man for himself, stay hungry and eat others along the way. No. What? That is not how anyone should be functioning, in my opinion. There's obviously a competitive side of this. Comparison is poison. It absolutely is, but it's almost impossible to not do. We all compare ourselves. I've done it before too. But make sure that at your core, you're doing your best to celebrate the successes of others, whether it be a milestone, a partnership they landed, or even just, hey, they're feeling good today. Lift them up even higher. It's important not just for the fact that that's what it looks like to be a good person, but the more you lift others up, the more they're going to help lift you up when you're down. If I've realized anything over the last 6 to 12 months, it's that when I really need a lift, because I've lifted others up in the past, I get that lift. I get those people who come around and say, hey, you've got this. I've gotten DMs because it's been a rough year, and I've tweeted as much. I've said as much. You know, I'm going through a hard time right now. I'm dealing with some stuff. Could really use some good vibes, and I usually get them. Right? Because I've done my best over the course of my 3.5 years to celebrate others' successes. We need to, as a community of content creators, we're all creating content. We need to do our best to lift others up. Now, amongst what it looks like from your day-to-day standpoint, a lot of us are really busy. I've been really busy, especially over the last 6 months. I've been teaching my kid during the day, trying to still do YouTube content at one point. I'm trying to innovate for the stream. I'm trying to, make sure that the things that need to get done around the house get done. And then I'm creating content full time on top of it. There's a lot going on. So I am limited in the amount of time that I can spend on DMs, on phone calls, on taking care of other folks. But I still make time to do it, even if it's for a small subset of the creators that I support, because it's important. Celebrating others' success, helping to lift others up, and being that light in what can be a very, very dark place. Content creation is hard. Content creation is tough. And if you don't have the proper support mechanisms in the relationships that you have and in the other content creators that you surround yourself with, it can be very, very easy to get sucked down a black hole of mental health issues, darkness. And that can be really, really hard to crawl out of. Celebrate others' successes. Tearing down others, that is not the way. Okay? Celebrate others' successes. Another topic that I want to cover as part of this particular dad log is doing what makes you happy versus doing what you have to do. Now, this looks different depending on whether or not you're part-time or you're full-time. Something that is interesting on Twitch is that a lot of people give you the advice, play the games you love. And I covered this as part of a previous dad log as well. If you do what you love, and what you love is Apex or League of Legends or whatever, you have to temper expectations for what your growth looks like. Now, for the sake of your mental health, you absolutely should create content that you love to create, which means playing games that you want to create. The double-edged sword of that is that, again, like I said, if you love League of Legends, if you love Apex Legends, if you love Fortnite, or you love Call of Duty, right, and you're a small creator, and you also love seeing your follower count go up, love seeing your sub count go up, love hitting milestones, love this and love that from a metric standpoint, those two things are always going to be at odds with each other. If you're a small creator and you love big, very popular games and that's what you want to stream, that's where you're going to struggle from a mental health standpoint. So doing what makes you happy, doing what makes you happy versus doing what you have to do to grow are likely going to be conflicted. So what strategies can you employ to achieve both? One is finding games that you enjoy playing, maybe not that you love playing, but that you enjoy playing, that also leaves room to put in place a strategy for growth. And I'm going to give you the same hack that I gave you in creating consistent content, episode number 2 of the Dad Logs Revisited. I'm going to give you the same advice that I did in that dad log. And that is, if you thrive on growth, what you need to do is you need to find a directory on Twitch, or if you're on Facebook or YouTube, right? I'm not as familiar with those platforms from a streaming standpoint, but the point remains the same, is that if there are 1,000 creators in the directory, and there's 100,000 people watching, but the top 5 creators own 80% of that, you'll never see the growth you want to see, right? But if there's 100 creators in a directory of 100,000 viewers, now all of a sudden, there's a little bit better chance that people are going to find you than they would have if there are 1,000 creators in that same directory. So it's about finding a game that you enjoy playing. On Twitch, it's usually around 1,000 viewers. So I'll give you some examples of games that are good growth games, generally speaking. Paladins, Warframe, Avengers. These are all games that I have played that usually show better growth than when I play League of Legends or Apex Legends, because I'm usually higher in the directory, which means my discoverability is better. And it balances games that I enjoy playing with the growth that makes me happy as well. There's always a matter of finding the balance and finding and doing what makes you happy versus doing what you need to do to grow. Now, for part-time creators, this is probably less important because this is a hobby for you, right? This is something you enjoy doing anyway, playing the games that you love. And if you don't see any growth, you don't care because you were already going to play those games anyway. And that's where you're making your best content. Now, you could take that content, you could repurpose it, repackage it for social media and potentially see growth that way, right? And I covered that as part of creating consistent content in my previous Dadlog Revisited. It's not that you won't see any growth at all, but it takes extra work to see that growth if you're playing bigger, more popular games. Absolutely do what makes you happy, but recognize that in doing what makes you happy, if you're seeking growth at all, you need to do something to make sure you're happy from that respect as well. And that might mean picking a game that you maybe don't love, but you like, you enjoy, you make good content for, and playing that game instead of playing, the hugely popular game that you won't see much growth in. So that's the small hack that I have is in terms of doing what makes you happy versus doing what you have to do. The last point that I'd make on that is that you are not always, especially as a full-time creator, going to be able to do things you love to do. I don't love writing emails to partnerships and sponsorships. I don't like dealing with emails. I don't even like managing numbers. I don't necessarily like looking at and analyzing, okay, here's the games that perform well on my channel versus the games that don't perform well on my channel. Do I structure my schedule around the games that perform well? Do I continue to play the games that don't perform well because I love playing them? And doing that analysis and that breakdown and understanding, okay, I need to play less of that game because it's not performing well on the channel and this is my livelihood. So I need to make decisions that are better for ensuring that I can still pay the bills and not just purely for the enjoyment of playing video games on the internet for a living. Right? Sometimes you have to make those hard choices. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do to continue to do what you love to do. And sometimes doing what you have to do isn't something you're going to enjoy as much as doing something that you would love to do. All that to say, you have to make smart choices and there's always a balance. And it doesn't matter what job you have. Everyone looks at now being a content creator, being a streamer. I stream video games for a living. Everyone looks at this as the dream job, right? They look at live streaming the way that kids growing up in the 70s and 80s looked at being a rock star as the dream, right? And some people pursue that to a fault. I pursued that to a fault. I was in a band for 7 years and I wanted to be a musician more than anything in the world. And then I realized how hard it was, that we weren't getting the breaks that we needed to continue to grow, and that eventually that endeavor got in the way of things that were more important. And so we let the band go. Make sure that you're absolutely doing what makes you happy, but sometimes you have to make that compromise to doing something that makes you maybe just a little less happy, but helps you achieve what you need to achieve to continue to grow in the way that also makes you happy. So the last thing that I want to cover as part of our mental health talk, the stress of being a full-time content creator versus being a part-time content creator, and the fact that when you are creating content and you start to hit a point where you start to make money, you need to realize that you're now running a business. And if you want to be a full-time content creator, you need to always treat your content as though it's a business. And this is the hard part about being a creator and making sure you're taking care of your mental health and your well-being, is that when you start to hit a point where you're like, this is going to be my business, all of the stress that comes along with running a business gets heaped on your shoulders. And everything the industry tells you about the metrics that are important, follower count and your CCV and your sub count and your, everything that's measurable in this industry that, by the way, you don't have control over for the most part. Talked about that in the last episode. Suddenly that stress starts to pile up. And this is where you see a lot of content creators break. This is where you see a lot of content creators fall apart. This is where you see a lot of content creators start to hit that burnout that I was talking about earlier in the episode. And this is where you have to be careful. I hit this point over the last 6 months where I realized that it didn't matter how much I streamed or how much I did. If I was putting out crap content because I was just too stressed, it didn't matter. I was getting in my head about why are people leaving? I was getting in my head about, what am I doing wrong, et cetera, et cetera. All of the things I was wondering to myself about why my metrics were not swinging the way that I wanted to. And it had to do with the fact that I was hitting that point of burnout. I was hitting that point where my creative juices were gone. My creative juices were just gone. And I wasn't doing anything to replenish them. I wasn't doing anything to re-energize, to disengage for long enough to really focus on making the best content that I could and for taking care of the community the way that they deserved. If you are a part-time content creator, and I'm going to talk directly to you for a minute, if you are a part-time content creator right now who has this mega dream of going full-time, and the money that you make now as your full-time job is significantly more than what you make streaming, I would urge you to consider letting go of this idea that you're going to be a full-time creator and enjoy content creation for what it is, a hobby right now. Now, this is not to discourage you from chasing your dream, but know that every day that goes by, it gets harder and harder and harder to go full-time. Now, for those who are in a different situation than I am, where I've got a family, I've got a wife, I've got kids, I've got a mortgage, I've got bills to pay, there's a certain level of income that has to be brought in for me to continue to do this full time. For others, or you might be a single dude living in a small apartment where your rent is manageable and you've got plenty of excess income right now to be able to throw into this hobby that could eventually turn into being full time. Your stress levels are going to be significantly less than the person who's doing this full time and has all of the things I previously mentioned. I'll be transparent with you. The only reason I can do this full time is that mom got game, got a job. I was lucky to marry up. She's a CPA, an accountant. She can get a job just about anywhere that pays pretty well and takes care of 3/4 of our bills. There's a lot of stress that comes with being full time when your income is out of your control. I'm at the mercy of my community. The only way I can continue to do this is if my community supports me financially. That is the reality of owning your own business. So your content either has to be that good or you have to be that lucky to have a big enough community that they can financially support you month over month over month over month. There's a lot of stress that comes with being a full-time creator. Don't take for granted being a part-time creator. Do it because you love it and the money will come. Or the money might not come. But either way, you're having fun doing and creating content. And I know this is easier said than done. A lot of what I have shared over the course of this podcast is easier said than done. We all are competitive. We all want to succeed. Many of you will want to see that success lead to being a full-time content creator. Just know that the grass isn't always greener. Coming as a full-time creator who was part-time for a good many years, there is a level of stress that comes along with being a full-time creator that many, many, many people are not prepared for. That even myself, as prepared as I thought I was, I've hit stumbling blocks. I've hit points where I'm like, I don't know if I can keep doing this anymore. I still have days where I wonder if I can continue to do this anymore. I'm being brutally transparent with you. The grass isn't always greener, and enjoy content creation for what it is. An opportunity to play video games for most of us, or maybe it's making leather products or doing whatever it is you stream, but it's something you love to do, I hope. Don't just do it because you think you're going to make it, because you won't. If you're doing this for the money to start with, you will not succeed. There's going to be very few people who are going to succeed doing that. The likelihood that that's how you're going to succeed will be extremely slim. So for the sake of your mental health, don't put that undue stress of, I got to make it, I got to go full time. Don't put that undue stress on yourself, because it will make you that much more likely to fail, to be jaded, to not be living a life that's worth enjoying. Every single one of you is special in some way. Not every single one of you is made to be a content creator. Give it a go. Enjoy it for what it is. Don't put undue stress on yourself, and create the best content that you possibly can. Guys and gals, thank you so much for joining me for this Dadlog Revisited, where we talk about mental health and your overall creator well-being. I appreciate you. If you liked this content, make sure you like, subscribe, ding the notification bell so that you know when I upload the next Dadlog Revisited, which will be next Friday. Thank you so much for joining me. Leave a comment below for any topic you think I missed. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with be life, be love. And as always, God bless and good games. We'll see you guys next time.